Joining us now is Ben Collins. He's an NBC News reporter who covers disinformation, extremism, and the internet. Ben, I'm really glad you were able to be here tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
So you cover disinformation and extremism for a living. I just want to ask you bluntly, and it's okay if the answer here is no. Is the tension that I'm feeling here real and warranted? This tension between understanding the extremism that's at work here while also desiring not to spread it, not to popularize it?
It's a very real tension, and it's something that I fight with personally while doing this job. So I did all Saturday. I was thinking, how do I make sure people understand what's in this manifesto? And also understand mostly that this man is not alone in thinking this, that he's part of a community of people who want to murder people without trying to spread that message. And it's really difficult. You know, I've spent the last day or two just looking through his Discord chats that he has posted to, you know, like a diary since December. And it's incredibly and deeply chilling. The idea that he had was, you know, he was going to go to the supermarket instead of a church or a school, which he thought about. He thought about going to a school down the street because he deduced that there were more black children in that school because he thought they didn't test as well. That's how racist this man was. But he decided instead to go to the supermarket because he wanted to make sure every black person feared for their life everywhere they went. And I don't really know how to say that to people without quoting him in that way, but it is the tension that we have. And just avoiding it now, or, you know, taking those ideas that he has and try to moderate them a little bit, which is what, you know, frankly, Tucker Carlson tries to do, that's irresponsible. I don't have solutions for this. I think people have talked today about banning 4chan or something, or, you know, blaming Twitch. And that's fine. You can do whatever you want. If you were to ban 4chan, these people would use a VPN and get around it. There's a website that is based in Japan. There's not a lot of jurisdiction there for us. People will find a way to get to 4chan if they want to get to 4chan. There is a civic responsibility, though, to not take their ideas and take the murder out of it and say it's legitimate political discourse on the highest rated cable news show, or not to run on that as a political platform. And I don't know how to make people stop doing that. But instead of stopping, they are absconding from responsibility.
Ben, what happens to these manifestos that get published online, or even the live streams of the killings, which we saw this weekend in Buffalo and we saw previously in Christchurch and in other terrorist attacks like this? How do those things live online? How do they function? And do they accomplish what the killers want, which is to both spread and popularize the ideas that motivate them, and also to radicalize and galvanize to action the other people who already believe them?
Absolutely. This man had a very specific plan on what to do. He posted it in his manifesto, and then he did it. He outlined what he was going to do once he got his camera on his head to go inside to make it look like a first-person shooter video game. What he was going to do was he was going to post a link to the manifesto, a link to his Twitch stream, to people who he had previously interacted with on Discord. On Discord, you can talk about anything. Usually people talk about video games, just a place to chat on the internet, especially if you're a teenager. But anyone who's interacted with him got this message. Some people who, you know, had nothing to do with extremist politics. And it was saying that he was about to go to the supermarket to kill all these people. And here was basically just a series of diaries since December of him planning out this attack. From there, people on 4chan started to watch this in real time on Twitch. Some of those people started to archive this. And that's how we even know that these videos exist, is that some of the bad guys, or some of the people who, you know, interact with these people and at least, you know, knew the ins and outs of 4chan, started posting it there. And that's why this is a problem. This is decentralized. This is something that happened on an Amazon-owned company's servers, Twitch, which tried to take this down in real time. Then it was spread to 4chan. Then it was spread to other bad websites. There was an 8chan knockoff. 8chan itself is dead, but somebody took the branding and created a different 8chan website. This is not something that you can stop. This is something, if somebody wants to do it, they can get it out there. And they realize, too, that the next person to do this, because they don't think they're the last, will include their name in the next manifesto. It's that manifesto is, a recitation of everyone else's previous talking points. It's literature to them, and they build on it. In fact, there is, the spookiest part about this, I would say to me, is that the format is pretty set now. You go and you write something at the top about white replacement, pretty much the same thing as the last guy. And then you do a Q&A with yourself to figure out why it's happening. And then you list your ammo, drop a bunch of 4chan memes that inspire you. It's no different than the last one. I'm actually a nerd to it at this point, Rachel. But it is, unfortunately, a set thing. They have figured out exactly the format for white nationalist terror manifestos.
Disinformation and misinformation are two different things, right?
Yep.
One is when you just get something wrong, and the other one is when you deliberately get something wrong, or in fact create something out of whole cloth and try to sell it as if it's true. Are we seeing wholly invented fake news, wholly invented false stories about Arizona, or are they just spinning and distorting what amount to small kind of normal distortions in the electoral process over the course of the day into something that seems more nefarious than it is?
Yeah, it's the second thing, Rachel. With this stuff, they take a grain of truth, which is, there were a couple of vote tabulation boxes that were malfunctioning, and they took a video of a person announcing this to the group. They said, basically, just wait in line or put it in that third box, and we'll deal with it later. They will be adjudicated. They will be hand counted at the end of the day. But that wasn't enough for some people on the internet who had to then wildly hypothesize about what was really going on with the ballots, because that's what goes on in this space. You got to remember the backdrop of this, Rachel, which is that there is this very big documentary in the pro-Trump internet called, by the way, we should put documentary in quotes there. There is a film called 2000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza that alleges very ridiculously that there are what he calls mules, people dropping off things into ballot boxes and all of these things, fake votes all throughout the country. It's been widely and continuously discredited and debunked. A good one from this weekend was from John Oliver, if you want to watch one of those. That is really taken hold in an underground way on the pro-Trump internet, and people have just been looking around for really anything funny that happened or any small thing that could be blown out of proportion. And that's exactly what's happening in Arizona.
Let me ask you one last question on this, Ben, and that is when we talk about stuff like this being focused on Arizona, because of our experience there in 2020 and what we saw outside some of the big counting sites in Arizona, one of the things we have to think about is the fact that Arizona is an open carry state, and a lot of the far right in Arizona has been willing to use their open carry privilege as a form of political intimidation. So I have to ask if any of the discussions that you're seeing about this, as you describe in the Bannon sphere and the sort of Trump wing of the internet and that part of social media, whether they are asking for in real life protests, whether they're asking for people to physically go to a place or do a thing, given what they are hypothesizing and distorting about Arizona's election tonight.
Yeah, Rachel, in the weeks before this, they were literally surrounding ballot drop boxes at the request of people associated with Steve Bannon, people going on his show saying that we need mule watchers. We need people to watch these ballot drop boxes. And some people did show up in fatigues outside of these ballot drop boxes as an effort to shoo away people or intimidate people outside of polls. So that was that effort. And now, Steve Bannon is not, he knows where the line is. These people consistently know what's legal and what's not legal to say in the moment. But if you go to the extremist forums, places like the Donald, where January 6th was planned on the internet, they talk about how voting doesn't even matter. You should just, this is going to come down to weapons anyway. So that is the worry, is that once those people in those spaces get the message from Steve Bannon that something is afoot, they can take it from there.
The larger piece of all of this conspiracy theory, it's coming from the underbelly of the internet, a place that most of us do our best not to spend time in. I hope you don't. I certainly don't. But luckily, we have NBC senior reporter Ben Collins, who is willing to spend a ton of time in the dark, weird corners of the internet for us. Joining us now, Ben Collins, NBC News senior reporter. He covers what he calls the dystopia beat. Ben, thank you for being with us tonight. This one is deeply alarming. You have covered a lot of garbage on the internet, but this one is alarming because you have described how these things sort of start on the underbelly of the internet. They work their way up to Fox News, and then they spread out, now being used by the Russians and the Chinese to justify some things that they are doing or might do in Ukraine.
Yeah, let's be very clear about this. This specific conspiracy theory started in the English-speaking American far right on a website called Gab. 8 days before the invasion, there was a user that posted the biolabs that they said were all over Ukraine that were being used in their eyes to build bioweapons. Now, these are research facilities. They are not, creating bioweapons there for the United States government, but it fit into that larger narrative that made sense in the far right, that Anthony Fauci is building bioweapons and releasing them all throughout the world to create the coronavirus, to lock the world down, all that stuff. It made a lot of sense. Problem is the Russians hadn't really thought of this conspiracy theory before the invasion. Before the invasion, they didn't talk about it at all. Until the 24th, the day they invaded Ukraine, the American far right seized on this biolabs conspiracy theory. In fact, they weren't really taking to this denazification narrative. So they were turning on Vladimir Putin and the far right and the QAnon spaces as well. But this biolab conspiracy switched everything around. In the last week, they have turned back to being effectively pro-Vladimir Putin in the QAnon and pro-Trump spaces. And then Russian propaganda took that American propaganda that was created in these far-right spaces, in the QAnon forums and on Gab, and made it their own.
Let's talk about, it reminds us of the theories that COVID-19 was deliberately started in a lab and spread out. Does this start and live in those kinds of places?
Yeah, that account on Gab was an anti-vax account. That's the remaining legacy of the anti-vax spaces on the internet. They are conforming to be part of the broader global far right to push these conspiracy theories against the Bidens, against Anthony Fauci, and against what they would call like the medical establishment all throughout the world. The global far right has coalesced around that. And it's worked for Russia, too. In fact, the TASS, the Russian news agency, they didn't post anything about biological weapons attacks that were created in Ukraine in the run-up, in the 1 month before the invasion in Ukraine. But on Thursday and Friday, they posted 24 separate articles about what they called biological weapons in Ukraine. This has become their pretext for this war, and it stemmed from the American anti-vax communities and the American QAnon communities.
Let's bring in NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins for more on the suspect's digital footprint. So, Ben, we heard just now from Miguel, the suspect's blog post expressed a whole host of far-right views. What else are investigators learning, and what kind of picture does this paint about the suspect?
Yeah, all of these far-right views sort of meld around one idea. There's a cabal running the world about pedophiles, things you would hear from QAnon and Pizzagate sort of conspiracy theorists. This might shock you, considering this guy's from California, this guy lived in Berkeley, but the holistic medicine to QAnon pipeline is not new to us. It's something that we've seen over and over again. It's something that you would see from 2015, 2016 onward. Back in 2007, this guy's blog was relatively normal. It was anti-establishment, but not violent, not something alleging a cabal running the world and pedophilia and all this stuff. But things really shifted 15 years later when he started posting again in August, and that's when he started posting about basically just QAnon-style stuff.
I think the main hurdle right now is when we have so many people putting out misinformation, quite frankly, into the public.
What are the pieces of misinformation that you're worried about or that you've seen surface?
That Mr. Pelosi knew this individual before this attack. We have no evidence that suggests that he knew him whatsoever.
Now, Ben, fact-checking for our viewers is not necessary because they're not consuming disinformation. But the point of this story is that this is what the DA is having to deal with. This is what everyone in public office has become. They are part prosecutors, part investigators, and part right-wing disinformation whack-a-mole.
Yeah, basically in the absence of an official narrative in the hours after this attack occurred, the pro-Trump internet created a completely different reality that was, frankly, they were writing fan fiction about the most embarrassing thing that could have happened in the Pelosi house that night, in their eyes, for Paul Pelosi. And for that's some sort of like a gay love plot thing that they have invented for themselves. And then when the real narrative came out, officially, admitted by David DePape, the attacker, the guy who broke into the house, they refused to accept it. They instead said, oh, the SFPD is covering something up. That's what you heard. You didn't just hear it on 4chan and Truth Social, the places that invented those conspiracy theories. You heard it on Fox News. You heard it winked at and alluded to by anchors last night on Fox News that, things just don't add up. They're just asking the question. And that's the issue here. And also Donald Trump today on the radio, he said basically the same thing. He's like, what about the glass at the all these things that I read on 4chan on Saturday morning. Those are the things that are coming out of people who run the GOP right now, both through their media apparatus and through official party lines.
Let's go right now to NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins. Ben, I thought about yesterday as the verdict was coming in. I thought about you because you follow all of this.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, I've known people that, have worked in tabloids in New York City. I'm totally serious here. Worked in tabloids in New York City and seen the absolute worst of what happens in New York, and it wears them down after a while. I know you're worn down by seeing all the lies you have to follow all across the internet, just the absolute sewers that your mind has to crawl through to report on this stuff. I'm dead serious. And I know it's grim.
He's going to start crying.
You're a reporter, so I want to ask you how yesterday felt for you. I will just say, though, do you think perhaps a $1 billion verdict, perhaps, that is going to make Alex Jones run for the rest of his life, do you think perhaps it might cool things a bit on your beat, at least from people who have something to lose financially?
Yeah, look, Joe, I've been covering this stuff for a very long time now, as you just said, and I never saw the light of day. I never saw the light at the end of the tunnel here. There was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here. These were families who had their kids' graves desecrated by people who chased them around the country. That's what was going on here. This was not a speech issue. This was a pure harassment issue that was framed politically over the last few years as a speech issue because it got wrapped up in a bunch of other stuff. Yesterday, you saw a court that worked. It was shocking in my line of work to see someone of Alex Jones' stature finally start to feel the heat a little bit. I was watching his show as the verdict came in. I was listening to him talk. And he was in disbelief, like literally disbelief. I don't think he thinks he's going to have to pay this money, even though he probably is going to have to pay this money. His world of lies that he built cannot withstand this. And he does not seem to understand that. He was talking yesterday about how he was saying, these people are never going to see this money, right? He was saying that on air as the verdict was being read out. They are almost certainly going to see at least a lot of this money. He's going to have assets seized. He's going to they're going to look into those offshore bank accounts and shell companies that he created. This is finally, there's going to be a little bit of justice for all the people that he hurt over the last few years.
Earlier today, there was speculation and fear that this attack may have been motivated by the dangerous far-right response to the FBI search of former President Donald Trump's personal residence at Mar-a-Lago. And tonight, there are new indications that that may in fact be the case. NBC News has confirmed that Schiffer was at the Capitol riot on January 6th, but it was his actions in recent days that are most unsettling. The day after the raid on Mar-a-Lago, Schiffer took to Trump's social media network, Truth Social it's called, and he posted a tirade calling for violence. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here because it doesn't deserve to be amplified, but it did include things like, quote, "We must not tolerate this one," and calling for people to arm themselves and be ready for combat. Then, in response to a reply to that post, which asked Schiffer if he was advocating for terrorism, he responded that users should kill FBI agents on sight. In response to another user, Schiffer replied, "You're a fool if you think there's a nonviolent solution." And after another user responded that his photo and info had been forwarded to the FBI, Schiffer responded, "Bring them on." Then today at 9:29 a.m., directly after the attack on the FBI field office, Schiffer posted this, quote, "Well, I thought I had a way through the bulletproof glass, and I didn't. If you don't hear from me, it's true. I tried attacking the FBI, and it'll mean either I was taken off the internet, the FBI got me, or they sent the regular cops." And it just stops there, mid-sentence. Luckily, no one but Schiffer was hurt today. NBC's Ben Collins was part of the team that confirmed the suspect's identity for NBC and dug up his social media post tonight. He's been following that story all day. Ben, amazing. You've been looking around some dark parts of the internet. I don't even know how to describe this story, but this is a guy who was fairly actively responding to the right-wing response to the search.
Yeah.
There's been a right-wing response that said this was illegitimate, and the FBI needs to explain itself. The Department of Justice did, and this guy seems to have decided to handle it on its own.
Yeah, Ali, I want to say, the very dark parts of the internet that I go on, the neo-Nazi parts of the internet, they don't really care about this that much. But the parts that are Trump obsessed, like truly obsessed with Donald Trump, those are the people right now who are the most angry. And that's what you saw today. For example, I want to say on May 7th, this is what Ricky Schiffer posted in response to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congresswoman Greene, they got away with fixing the election in plain sight. It's over. The next step is the one we used in 1775.
Wow.
So he was thinking like this for a while, and then this search of Mar-a-Lago happened, and he said, this is the end of it. He said, we must not tolerate this one. That's what he said 2 days ago, and that's what led to this entire thing. So my worry is that this is not on the darkest parts of the internet. Right. I know those places. I know where the neo-Nazis hang out. I know their telegrams. I know all that stuff. This is on the parts that are obsessed with Donald Trump. These are your neighbors. These are the people down the street who are convinced, by the way, that the IRS hiring 87,000 new agents, that's a secret ploy for people to come and take your guns. And they're going to come any day now, so you better get armed.
The FBI has arrested a woman for making bomb threats to the Boston Children's Hospital. The Massachusetts native faces up to 5 years in prison, while authorities say the hospital is becoming an increasing target of false threats. NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins joins us now. Ben, what is happening in Massachusetts there? I mean, why did this woman make the threats? What's the motive?
Yeah, so this woman is named Catherine Levy. She's 37 years old. She's from Westfield, Massachusetts. And she sent a bomb threat specifically to Boston Children's Hospital, saying a bomb was on the way and calling them sickos at the hospital. Now, why would she call them sickos? Some, doctors at a children's hospital? There is a right-wing misinformation campaign about trans youths that's been going on the far right in the last few weeks. They've been saying that they are treating trans people in ways they are not, certainly. And it has made the far right extremely upset and started targeting both doctors and the hospital itself.
Ben, the FBI says that, basically the Boston Children's Hospital isn't the only one, that others have also been subject to more than a dozen of other threats recently. So who else has been receiving these threats, and what is the pattern here, if there is one?
Yeah, it's children's hospitals throughout the country who say they treat trans people. Specifically trans youths. And look, it's being targeted by a very specific set of right-wing influencers. There's this account called Libs of TikTok on Twitter, has over 1 million followers on Twitter, and has been explicitly driving this harassment campaign against these hospitals. But it's been picked up by people who used to be big into the critical race theory, anti-critical race theory movement on the far right. This is their new boogeyman. The unfortunate thing is now it's targeting doctors and it's evacuating hospitals where kids are receiving cancer treatment. So it's a pretty scary time right now.
The larger thing that we learned about his online identity was he was in an internecine feud, I would say, with a hate site called Encyclopedia Dramatica. That site has been tied to 2 different mass killings. One is a guy named William Atchison back from 2017. He shot up a school in New Mexico, killed 2 people. He was a sysop or an admin at that website. What's notable about this website specifically is that it has a kill count for mass shooters. And it's almost like a high score thing. There's actually a section of the site called high scores. And if you target gay people or minorities, they note that with slurs in the profile. And they have updated his profile to note that as well. We do know that he was, he made this bomb threat with his mom in the house. There's this video of this. His mom took a Facebook Live of this happening in real time.
This was last year.
And he was let out. That is the unclear thing. Here he is, arriving back from jail.
And she called police from inside, and they showed up in tactical gear.
And he said he was ready to
for hours.
And he said he was ready to blow on this Facebook Live. He was ready to get into a firefight over it.
And obviously he was brought in, but prosecutors did not go forward with the case, and we're still digging through and trying to figure out why exactly that is.
Yeah, and the case was sealed, that part is not particularly different in Colorado law. I do want to say, though, Am I doing something wrong here? Here are some headlines that I wrote the last 6 months. Fueled by internet's far-right machine, anti-LGBTQ threats shut down trans rights and drag events. Remember, there was a drag event happening in Colorado. Yeah. Anti-trans stalkers at Kiwi Farms, which is a anti-trans website that stalks people, are chasing one victim around the world. Their list of targets is growing. That was a couple months ago. Doctors under threat from far-right activists for providing trans care. Boston Children's Hospital faces bomb threat after right-wing harassment campaign. There were 3 of those bomb threats. FBI charges Massachusetts woman with Boston Children's Hospital bomb threats, so they found one of the people. At least 20 Republican politicians have claimed that schools are making accommodations for students who identify as cats. That was before the midterms. Here are 3 more from my colleagues in the last 3 weeks. As election nears, some conservative groups have ramped up anti-trans campaign ads. Far-right figures appear to be testing Twitter's boundaries for anti-LGBTQ speech. GOP senator targets TikTok influencer with anti-transgender taunts. And I'm just wondering, what could I have done different? Seriously, as reporters, what can we do different? Because there are 5 dead people in a strip mall, because that was the only place they felt safe as gay or trans people in this town in Colorado Springs. And I am trying to thread this needle here. I'm trying to say that this is happening. This targeted stuff has real life impacts. They say on the internet has real life impacts. And I'm going to fail, by the way. I'm going to, freak out because it's happening, because I wake up and I see that there are 5 dead bodies. But I think we have to have a come to Jesus moment here as reporters. Are we more afraid of being on Breitbart for saying that trans people deserve to be alive? Or are we more afraid of the dead people? Because I'm more afraid of the dead people. I don't want to wake up on a Sunday and see that all of these headlines came to fruition.